you here for amazing conversation with some friends of ours around sport and indigenizing that space. I want to start off with a land acknowledgement from MLSE Foundation and acknowledge that, you know, we're sitting on traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, Mississaugas of the Credit, the Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Our offices are here, and we have the privilege to work and be governed by the Three Fires Confederacy, the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt, and in more recent times with Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaty. I really encourage you to share in the chat if you're on different land today, to acknowledge that space. For me personally, I really look at land acknowledgements as a way and a moment to reflect on how I can use reconciliation as a verb, and as a settler, how I recognize and uplift the deep contributions Indigenous nations have made to the land I call home. And so I would encourage you as we talk today about our with our guests about how to do an Indigenized sport, I encourage you to kind of reflect on your positionality within that space and how you can live reconciliation through your day-to-day practices in programming. A little housekeeping. Please keep yourself on mute. Whether you go on video or not, that's totally up to you. But please keep yourself on mute so that you can hear our wonderful panelists. I'm going to introduce our lovely moderator, and let's jump right into it. I think there's a lot of great conversations going to happen here today, and I'm really excited to hear what folks have to say. So without further ado, I wanted to introduce Quay. She is a manager at Humber College in the Indigenous Education Department, all around badass human, wicked friend, and I'm excited for her to jump in and help us moderate today. So I'll pass it over to you, Quay, to do your thing.
Thanks, Kendra. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, awesome. I'm so excited to be here today with you all and with my pals here on the panel. Like Kendra had said, you can call me Quay, but I wanted to introduce myself in my language. So Quay Bawajigewin Mukwa Dodem Yediganzibi Donjaba. I am of the Bear Clan and I come from Garden River First Nation. Quinn, another panelist, knows that we're really good at sports in Garden River. But yeah, I am a former varsity athlete. I played at Algoma University. I am now a recreational athlete and I just play for fun. That's the lens that I'm bringing today as a moderator. And I am a proud pal of MLSE. I like to support any way I can. Some of you might have seen me for the 4 seasons of reconciliation, or maybe on any of the advisory committees for building back sport. But I will hand it over now to Quinn, since I teased him up right out of the gate, to introduce himself too.
We got MLSE for hosting this conversation. Mr. Tamgiwin Gabo Nin Nago, Quinn Meawasige He, Inabjing Donjaba, Mukondo Dem Nongo Dash, Nimkii Youth Collective. And we got Nimkii Bijak, Bizunai Kaye, Apchigo Chinandam, Kichpitanda, Gut Kana Go Eshige Ma. So, just an introduction. People know my Anishinaabe name. My community, Sitmer First Nation, it's a signatory to the Robinson Huron Treaty of 1850. Yeah, I said that I'm happy to be here and happy the user here as well for listening. So, Jimmy Gutch for hosting the space quick. Oh.
Sam, did you want to give a quick introduction, or however long it takes?
You want me? Okay. Anim Bawajigewin Mukwa Ndejnikaz, Madawagaming and Donjaba, Takaranto and Donji Wabajachi Nadoran. My name is Sam Kloestra. I'm originally from Outagamie First Nation in Northern Ontario. It's the furthest south community in Treaty 9, about an hour south of Timmins. I've been living here in Toronto now for about almost a decade, working in nonprofits in the Indigenous community. One of my first jobs, I actually started at First Story at the Native Canadian Center with Philip. So it's nice to see Phil here. It's a throwback. I have a background in placemaking, community engagement, a lot of Indigenous youth focused work. I'm not an athlete, but I wear a lot of jogging pants. So like, I think I have a say. And also I grew up in a community that just recently actually finished our gym, which has been under construction for basically my entire life. So it's nice to see that it's a closed arena. So we finally space to play hockey when it's not -40. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this whole conversation today, and it's so nice to see folks.
Thanks, Sam. All right, Philip, since Sam mentioned the throwback connection.
Nani Bajul Tansi Sego, welcome everyone. Anashnavi is Unikajwan, Noodjmowin Mushkogiash, and Gitchi Manadu and Dodam Nishupishu Ninash, Anashnavi Shani, Lakota, Patawaram, Yojibwe, Algonquin, Mississauga, and Mohawk. Morning. I'm an artist, activist, educator. I have many hats that I wear all the time, and I enjoy what I do. I know that this is a big subject we're going to talk about today, but I just want to add something. There's some really important stuff that artists can do in our community, and one of the big things that what we do is we make reflections that say this is our land, and that's the important thing, because a lot of the reasons why this residential schools were enacted was because they were trying to wipe out our culture and identity, and this idea of assimilation was the big part of it. And we all know that backfired, because Indigenous people, we were all going into this thing called the eighth fire. And I'm going to let this cat out of the bag now. I got a little bit of time here. I don't want to say too much, but I'm just going to say, the first number of children that they found, 215, is no accident. And I think it's a part of a bigger ongoing event that we call the eighth fire. If you add up all those little numbers, 215, it adds up to 8. And that's the beginning of this big change, with his Indigenous people having a voice across the land again. So I'm good children.
Coach Philip, and now I'll hand it over to Gabby.
Tanse Gabinet Sagason, Pakchahanse Otsinia, Ani Bojo, Mishan Dengue, Anquat Klindish Nakaz, Pakchahanse and Donjaba, Umamawene Nanish, Nabia King and Donji, Makwando Dam, A7G, Minawa Oip, oh my gosh, and then I forgot it. A7G Ndonoki. Okay, so A7G Minawa Oip Ndonoki. So hey everyone, my name is Gabby. I'm originally from Alberta. My family comes from Fishing Lake Métis settlement, one of the 8 land-based Métis settlements, recognized land-based Métis settlements in the world, because there's not really any Métis anywhere else. Yeah, and I moved all the way here to unceded, unsurrendered Algonquin territory as a preteen, and I've been here ever since. So definitely a part of what we call the Indigenous diaspora, that's kind of created our own communities and livelihoods in urban environments. Yeah, and then over here we started a youth organization to help support the needs and just ensure that youth weren't falling between the gaps here in Ottawa. There's actually quite a big Indigenous population here in Ottawa, that people don't really realize. But yeah, miigwech, hi, thanks for having me. I'm not sure, can you guys like hear me? I feel like it's really loud. Okay, so anyways, the other thing I was gonna say is that for whatever reason, I'm always surrounded by Anishinaabe. So this is another example of that. So happy to be amongst some cousins. Looking forward to this talk.
Okay, so just to warm us up a little bit, I wanted to ask everyone, so part of sport and physical activity and like just general life too is like you gotta get amped up sometimes. So what is everyone's pump up go-to song that gets you ready for the day, to run, to go to a meeting? What do you guys listen to?
Okay, so this song, I don't know how amped it is, but it gets me kind of my foot tapping and kind of gets my head bobbing a little bit. And that's the Rubber Band Man by the Spinners. So, you know, from the Guardians of the Galaxy, and you just tapping your feet and kind of just gets me bobbing. So that's just one song that came to head immediately when you asked.
I guess I can go. Am I going to be vulnerable? Does the entire Renaissance album by Beyonce count as a pump up song? Because that's the only way to listen to it. And for a while, it was like, that was the moment for me. It was just that whole album. And especially America's Got a Problem, because I really like the way that Beyonce says no. And I think we should all say no a lot more to things, especially when they don't serve us. So I'm going to go with that.
What is the song that came out recently, like the top one? I had to like, every time I hear it, I have to stop what I'm doing to go and listen because the beat of that song just gets me.
The Beyonce? Oh, it's the first one that she released, right? Are you thinking it's Break My Soul?
You know, my soul.
Yeah.
There
I
we
have
go.
to stop what I'm doing and go listen to it all the time when I hear it.
We should just entirely derail this conversation and just listen to the album together. And that's called Community. That's so everybody listening, pay attention.
Here's my song, guys. Play it. Hold on a second. It'll come up, of course. You hear okay?
We're not hearing anything. Did you want to let us know what it is?
You know what? Probably because I don't have a good speaker on my computer. Is it anywhere?
It's okay. We probably don't have the copyrights to hear it.
Okay, anyway, I'll shut it off. Anyways, it's One Fine Morning. It's a great tune, and it's something that I always listened to when I was growing up, and it's made by Lighthouse.
I guess mine, I don't really have one. Like this is like, you know, when they ask you like when you're in grade school, what's your favorite color? And then I'll be like red, blue, red, like green, purple. So mine is definitely a whole playlist. And it's a playlist called it's called High Maintenance. And it's just a playlist full of like Saweetie, Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion. Just like I love listening to like female rappers and MCs. So yeah.
I loved all of those. Right now, mine is the remix of the Mariah Carey song Energy, or no, it's called Energy now. That one is that song for me. Okay, so jumping in then, we're here today to talk about community and holistic approaches to Indigenous mental wellness and culturally responsive sports programming for Indigenous youth. So my question to you first is, what does the role of sport, physical activity, and movement play in helping you individually reduce your stress, anxiety, and improve your mental health? Because for me, I know that like when I watch the Throne album and I go for a run, I can lock in, and then it's kind of like my own like little meditation session. So how does it help you each?
Funny, I'll share. Played some baseball. So I started playing sports again. So I played sports growing up, being part of a team and stuff like that. I really liked sports. And then I stopped playing for whatever reason. And then so I started picking up, pickup leagues. I'm in a pickup league for hockey, which is really awesome. I played, summer ball, and I'm in fall ball right now, baseball. So, and I played sports growing up, and for me, being a part of a team has been something that's been very helpful. Being able to socialize, and kind of what I didn't notice growing up, it helped to build character for myself. Helped me be part of a team kind of organization, or but just having supportive people, playing together, but also like in terms of stress, like it just helps me to like being active, and sports has done a lot for me, especially times when I'm having really high stress and mental health challenges. It really helps to kind of bring things down, and to know that I have a team that supports me, so that feeling of being supported, and that I can count on others on the team has been very helpful, for myself as an individual, I guess, as well. Sure. Yeah.
And I loved how you mentioned being a part of a team, because I find the same thing. Like when you're a part of the team, it's like, it is like community, it is. And you won't feel alone. And you had touched on that too. But Sam, I saw that you unmuted as well.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna say, I've already established that I don't play sports, but I do think an honorable mention should go to just like stretching and being in your body, doing yoga, just even having like mindfulness while doing things like stretching has for me done a lot of what Quinn just said, which is help me to be more grounded, help me to kind of like be in my body and able to take in the moment that's happening around me without being overwhelmed by like anxiety or by the news or anything that's happening. And I think that stretching is something that, at least in the Indigenous community, we don't really do as much as we should. We're not like on the floor rolling around, we don't have the butt for it. Like we need padding. But for me, it was like a way for me to get that same kind of like satisfaction of a run without having to leave air conditioning.
Thanks. You also bring up a good point about being connected to your body and like dropping in and tuning in and like listening to like what hurts, what doesn't. I'm not a professional in this realm, but I think like anxiety is correlated to like a disconnection from nature, but also when you want to be in control of something, what can you control? Your body. So stretching definitely helps that. Gabby or Philip, did you want to add anything?
Hello there. Yeah, it's kind of very similar to Sam. I'm not like a big team player, but it's okay, because I do like cycling, and I do power walking, and I do weightlifting every day. So I'm either doing weightlifting or I'm doing power walking every day, and it just helps keep me fit and young and keep my body circulating. But I'm a sports fan, totally. I love boxing, and I love MFA stuff, so I'm into that kind of brutal sports, but it's really entertaining. Anyways, that's it for me.
Yeah, I guess I have a bit of a different kind of perspective on like sports and movement. So I really, really love doing land-based activities as a form of movement. I really love working on hides and moose hides, and I've seen like some pretty buff guys that work out every day come and work on moose hides and completely be demolished. And then meanwhile, there's like these little ladies, and like they don't even look like they work out or anything, and they're just going at it for like days, right? So I think that that's a really big part of this whole conversation is a lot of people like they'll go work out and play sports like because they want to look a certain way. But I really think it's important to do movement and exercise and sports for like your mental health, and so that it gives back to community, that you're building community, and also to just realize that not all of us are ever gonna look like Kim Kardashian or any of these like famous people that we kind of like have been told we have to look like in order to be fit. Just the realities of like Indigenous bodies is that our bodies are never gonna look like that, but it doesn't mean that we're not beautiful, and it doesn't mean that we're there's something wrong with us. That's just like how we're built, and it has to be accepted and acknowledged. And so yeah, I really love being out on the land, like even berry picking. Like people make fun of berry pickers, but have you tried squatting for hours while you're like literally trying to pick up this little thing? So berry pickers, that's some real good muscles in your in your butt and your legs right there. Just like all kind of medicine picking, there's like so much that goes into it. Like I mean like a dedicated medicine picker. Even like, oh, we do like whitewater kayaking, so that's wild. And like not only is it wild on like your body, but you're literally like thrown into the water, and so you're like you have to know how to breathe. And like that's the thing that takes the biggest toll on you, is like how to breathe, and safety and not getting in your head. And then that's I find like the other something that really holds us back from like engaging in a lot of like hard movements or tenuous like kind of exercise, is that we get in our head and we'll tell ourselves like, oh, I can't do this, or I don't know why I'm doing this. And so just like getting into your body and like feeling out your muscles, is like Sam was talking about, is really, really important. And especially like when you're doing things on the land and in community, I find that those self-saboteur thoughts aren't as prominent, because you're like, I'm doing this with community, I have a purpose for why I'm doing this. And so yeah, that's kind of like how I move. And a lot of people, like, I'm pretty slow. Like I like to just like smell the flowers, like on my walks, like I just like to go slow. And so people kind of like call me a little senior. Not an elder, but they say I'm a senior. And but then once you get me going on like a moose hide, like I can go at it for hours. So yeah, never be like, don't let how someone looks in like make you determine how fit they are or how much exercise they can do. So Miigwech, hi.
Thanks for that, Gabby. You also speak on like how our lives used to be. Like we weren't what is the word? Sedimentary. We were people who moved, and like our daily lives where we were physically fit. Yeah. So thank you all for that. I wanted to jump into individual specific questions. And the first one is going to my pal Quinn. So currently you are working with the Imagine Nation program, an Indigenous youth mentorship program. One of the main focuses is energy and sustainability. Can you please tell us about the importance of sustainability and its impact on Indigenous youth athletes?
Yes, most certainly. Yeah, so Imagination program through the Indigenous Clean Energy. Shout out to them for the support and kind of working with them and the amazing work they do on kind of renewable energy and kind of community energy sovereignty, food sovereignty, Indigenous sovereignty. So do really good work. But yeah, so the idea of sustainability and how that transfers into multiple aspects of people's lives is something that I'm starting to become more and more aware of. A lot of things, it's about relationships, and so I find a lot of this is the relationship you have to yourself, your community, your family, your nation, the land, animals, and things like that, as it relates to some of the work that I do. And so people always talk about, the rights that people have. And then some of the things that I've been coming to understand is the responsibilities that we first have. So the responsibilities that we have to, our non-human kin, the water, Mother Earth, to the trees, the animals, and so starting to understand, look at sustainability from that perspective, from not a rights-based approach, but a relationship, based on relationships, based on responsibilities that you have, and and as a harvester as well, someone who harvests, sustainable harvesting, not over harvesting, being mindful of when we harvest and why we harvest, and the relationship that we make to whatever it is that we're harvesting has been super important for me. And that translates to sustainable development is and the work that we do is making sure that we take care of ourselves. I think that's super important, right? We can just overexert ourselves often and push ourselves. Often in kind of Western society, it's just pushing. It's a pushing and pushing and pushing, and productivity, right? And often that's not sustainable, right? So if you kind of give everything all the time, and you never take moments to breathe, to reground, to refocus, to take care of yourself, then you can end up in positions where you are burnt out, overworked, you don't have the energy to kind of continue on, or you might take on too many things all at once, which I have a problem with doing, is I often say yes to everything. And so but coming back to those good reminders of being sustainable with my time as well, so my time, my energy, and the work that I do, for community as well. If I'm not healthy, then that translates into the work that I do, and not being able to be 100%. So taking time to take care of myself, and knowing my limits, knowing when I am in a place where I'm exhausted, and acknowledging that and saying, I actually need time, it is challenging. And so, and it's hard sometimes because there's a lot of pressure, especially on Indigenous young people, a new generation that's coming up. There's a lot of work to be done. And a lot of these things are urgent around, revitalizing language, culture, knowledge. The burden that we all collectively carry is heavy. And so, but also being mindful of is that I can't, as an individual, do it all by myself. It's I can rely on my family, my extended family, my kin, my community, and I think that's what's important, the team, so it's kind of what I thought I'd share about that. Oh.
Thanks, Quinn. And I think you really speak to setting boundaries and being really self-aware, and always checking in with yourself. And I think that Western society gets really about productivity, like you were saying, but colonialism is a scammer, and we're doing the long con on it. So we got to take care of ourselves in order to get through it and overcome it. Okay, Sam, now my next question is for you. There is a vast variety of knowledge that exists across a diverse group of Indigenous communities. And, I really wanted to address that with this group at MLSE, you can't pan-indigenize us. So how can we increase youth access to elders, knowledge keepers, and teachers, knowing that everyone is so diverse? And how can Indigenous youth leverage this access into a greater return for their mental health and in the long term, their communities?
Okay, that's a real quick question. I think, okay, so three things. I'm splitting it into three. The first thing is that there is a diverse group of nations on this continent of Turtle Island, and that we are similar in some ways and very different in other ways. And that includes the way that we, just go about life, what kind of sports we practice pre-colonially, what kind of sports we practice now, all of that stuff. I think from settler society perspective, you have to acknowledge that this cultural mosaic that Canada claims to be the master of, it existed in this land before Canada was here. It existed before settlers came. We had a diverse group of people who shared this entire continent. And, you have to come to the understanding that we're not all the same. Because Haudenosaunee play lacrosse has nothing to do with what the folks are doing on the West Coast. Did they play lacrosse too? Who knows? Probably not, because of the distance. But unless we're coming from a place of understanding that these individual nations are exactly that, individual nations who might have common customs, but are at the end of the day separate from other, then we can't actually go forward for, if you want to have a reconciliation based kind of approach. The onus is often put on Indigenous youth to explain this, though, to settlers, that no, you can't just have a one size fits all approach. You can't just say, well, we want Indigenous youth and elders to connect more, without understanding what the relationship is that's already been established in that community or in that nation between Indigenous youth and elders, because the roles are going to be completely different. So going into the second part of this, we've acknowledged that, yeah, we are in a diverse Indigenous people. The second part of this question, which is how can we connect Indigenous youth to elders, knowledge keepers, and teachers? I think Gabby already answered that question. It's going back to the land. A lot of our athletics, a lot of our just movement with our body, it's done in tandem with teaching. When we are canoeing, we are also learning. If you're going on a snowshoe hike with an elder across the lake, that elder is they're telling you everything that they know while it's happening. If you're tanning moose hide, you're also getting a lecture. And so you have to be able to connect those two things. Is an elder going to be giving you teachings while you're playing basketball at the gym? Probably not. But if you can curate experiences which connect your goal, which is to have Indigenous people moving, or have young Indigenous people in sports talking about their bodies, stuff like that, and have elders there, then we need to find a common ground. And often that common ground looks like berry picking. It looks like dip net sucker fishing. It looks like collecting cedar. Reimagine what athletics or what sports or what exercise looks like in your brain. And then the third thing was, and how can Indigenous youth leverage this access into a greater return for their mental wellness and in the long term their communities? Well, I mean, it's not really up to Indigenous youth to be the ones who are focused on that. Indigenous youth right now are focused on revitalizing stuff that we've lost. We're focused on relearning. We're focused on finding out the truth of our reality. And it's not up to us to be saying, well, we have to now take all of these relationships, leverage them, which is an interesting word because it brings to mind capitalism and stuff. How are we leveraging the resources that our Indigenous youth are, which is also a really gross way to say Indigenous youth are a resource to be extracted from. But Indigenous youth will naturally into a place of wellness in the long term by following the ways of teachings that our elders have been sharing with us. For Anishinaabe, that looks like things like the 7 grandfathers, but it also looks like the medicine wheel. It looks like our basic understanding, our philosophy that we've already been sharing down, but it's just coming into a place where we can live that way of life. You cannot live a physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually well life while you're worried about rent, while you don't have access to water, while you have a colony literally trying to dictate your identity and every aspect of your life. So if we're looking, ooh, there's a chat question. Let everybody read it.
Sorry,
yeah.
That's just me summarizing stuff. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. But if you're looking to give an opportunity for young people, young Indigenous people to reach their fullest potential, then you have to reevaluate why you think what a young person's fullest potential needs to be reached and what it looks like. Instead, you should be asking that young person, well, what is it that you need? What is it that you want? And how can I help you get to that place? And that's for any industry. That's not just like sports. That's like education, health. That's a holistic approach to the way of our relationship, what it should be, which is like a nation to nation relationship. Sorry, I went off.
That was great. Go in whatever direction the wind takes you. What I wanted to tie together though, before I ask Abby a question, is what Quinn and Sam both touched upon, was like community and the importance of that. I also think back to, so I grew up in Garden River First Nation, and I played basketball in Rankin and in Garden River. So I played this sport in my community, and that gave me the confidence to play in university, to find sport in Toronto. That safety that was established for me at a young age helped me later on in life. And I think there's a crazy factor about, like, for women, if you don't introduce a young woman to sport by the time they turn 13, they'll have a 10% chance of being physically active when they're in adulthood, something like that. But back to the community aspect, Gabby, my question for you is about 7th Gen. So Assembly of 7th Generations makes it clear that it takes community to run programming in the community. Can you share a few tips and tricks for organizations interested in running this style of programming and the positive mental health impacts that it has had on youth that attend your programs?
Yeah, like I think a lot of it is what Quinn and Sam have already mentioned. But I guess for non-Indigenous folks, like there's a different idea of what community is. So maybe I'll touch on that a little bit. But one of the most important parts of community, and it's gonna sound so simple, is literally just spending time with each other. You have to spend time with each other. That means, like, dedicating a day out of the week to spend time with community. And that's exactly what we do at A7G. So we spend every Friday together, and people literally dedicate that Friday night just to come out. And there's no like workshop, there's no hey, you're gonna get this prize or something like that. There's no incentives really, except for food. Like, of course, we always have food, but we're literally just chilling. And people don't understand the importance of that. Like, even a lot of Indigenous youth that have been disconnected, often like they'll come stop by, but have a hard time like understanding the importance of just sitting with each other, laughing with each other, eating with each other. There's no and kind of like what Quinn was talking about, it's not a right. Like, you don't have a right to be in community. It's a responsibility. And so you literally have to sit there and, maybe you have capacity to listen to your peers that are having a hard time, and you use that capacity that you have and you give back. Or maybe you have capacity to cook one night, or maybe you have capacity to even like dream of an activity for the group to do. But maybe on the flip side, it's a bad day for you and you need the support of the community. And that's how community works. It's reciprocal. There's no strings attached. It's not like, well, I'm gonna listen to you tonight, and that means maybe in a couple of months you have to listen to me. We're not keeping tabs about like how much time we've put into community. And so I think that's like the biggest thing that people don't understand. And it takes a while to like if you've grown up, away from your community, away from your family, I think that it kind of misconstrues how you have responsibilities, and it turns into this right. Like, I have a right to be here. I have this. And community is so different than that. Community can be really hard. Community can be really grounding, really humbling. I think sometimes people too, they get humbled in community, and they think that it's like an attack on them, and then they just like don't come back. But it's literally just there's there's no like leader of the community either. And I think that's like something that kind of freaks people out because we're so used to like school, for example, where there's a teacher and I can go tell the teacher when something's wrong. It's like, no, like literally we have to work this out together. So it's really, really different. But I guess the other things that I wanted to touch on with like community and all of that is that it is peer-to-peer support. And so that's how I think it's easier for people to understand when you say peer-to-peer support. So it's literally like peers supporting peers and vice versa, and that reciprocal exchange. And then I guess a few other things I'll kind of touch on is that it's actually something that Christy told me one time, and it kind of goes into that conversation about elders. And so in like this colonial society, there's this we're taught that if we read something and then we make a test, then we're the expert in it. But that's not how traditional knowledge is exchanged in Indigenous communities. So one time I told Christy, I was like, yeah, like I saw, I really want to have like more elders with A7G and like, I really want all these things. And she is like, just like settle down. And she is like, literally just go and sit down with elders. Don't have any expectations. Don't ask for like this one specific teaching about the medicine wheel or something like that. Like literally just sit and have tea with them. Ask them how they're doing. Treat them like, you treat your grandma, not like a professor. And she also said like ask them if they want, yeah, do elders dishes, do their laundry, rake their leaves, just keep it simple. I find what's happening in this kind of whole reconciliation era is that a lot of corporations and governments, they're putting elders on like this pedestal. And honestly, some of those elders, they make their living off of honorariums now. And that means that we, as a grassroots youth organization, don't have access to those elders because they're expecting a large honorarium now. So it's really quite sad how that traditional knowledge and elders have been commodified in this era of reconciliation. But anyways, all that to say, just keep it simple, spend time with each other, don't have agendas, spend time, and that's how the most beautiful things I think are created. Yeah.
I agree with that, Gabby. And I think whenever you do things or plan programming with a good heart and good intentions, it just works out. And thank you so much for like breaking down community and how that really looks for those who might not have fully gotten the understanding. Part of what you said about community is there's also that trust. Like if like you're like, oh, there's no like you owe me this because I did this for you. It's like, no, I just have trust when I'm down and out. Maybe you're gonna like make me lunch one day by chance, or like you're gonna have my back. There's that level of trust in community. Okay, so we're gonna now start talking about art therapy with Philip. So Philip, art therapy is a popular modality in Western society, and with Canada's first Indigenized arts therapy program starting in 2009, we have begun to see an emergence of folks using Indigenized art therapy with youth clients. What art-based activities can program providers in their curriculum? How do you help them? Okay, I couldn't read this sentence. So how do you help youth and their mental health with art?
That's a really good question. And I was doing that long before 2009. But that's the thing. You explore things, and you're all of us here in the panel are recovering our identity still. This is an ongoing process. It's going to happen for generations. And it's nice that we're here at the doorstep taking a look at what that really means. And that's important. So for me, some people ask me why I started doing woodland style art, and some people think I just, got lazy and I started copying this because it was a great thing to do and people were making money and all that. Had nothing to do with that. The reason why I started woodland style art is because that was the way I thought I could teach our youth something about their culture, talk about cosmology, and talk about all these different elements that Norval Morrisseau brought into modern times. He brought our culture into the 20th century, and before him, it was all anthropology and all a Western narrative. It was never an Indigenous narrative, which we need, because Indigenous narratives are the things that are still marginalized across our country here. And I say our country because I'm meaning it's our country. Not, this is not just a settler country, this is Indigenous country still. And there were so many good questions you asked these previous, people, and also great answers from all you guys. I love hearing what you guys had to say, because this is a contribution that's kind of never really acknowledged out there, but we just do it on our own because we believe in community and we want to support our communities, and we know what they need because we know what our problems are. So that's how we know what they need. So that was my really first stab at trying to figure out how am I going to bring this idea of culture to the young people. And so I started the practice of woodland style painting, and then it evolved, and I realized, well, this is something maybe I should stick with, because I can still send this message out in a wide range, right across the city, and maybe right across the country. So I ended up doing a lot of programming around that, and this was at a youth shelter that I did this at. And I still talk with all these youth. These guys are men and women now with their own families, and they remind me of those good days that we had at the youth shelter. And so I wasn't just an artist, I'm a practitioner of our culture. I'm a sun dancer, pipe carrier, sweat lodge leader. So I have all those things that I bring into my art practice too. So it's not just about art. I don't like to compartmentalize things like that because that's very Western. Indigenous people, we all have this really amazing process called community, and it's a holistic approach to life. So what do we have? That means that everything is connected. So one thing is terrible in one part, that means it's terrible all the way around. It's not just, so when we have a bad place in our community, everybody feels it, because we all recognize things, and we all even recognize the stereotypes that are put out there about us, and we all deal with them daily. I tell professors that I talk to at universities, and because I do lots of lecturing all over the place, and they don't realize that we are still facing this adversity of racism right across our city, and it happens every single day. I face it a lot because I look so native, and I also, I'm educated. And what's good about it is identity. So if you have a good sense of identity, sometimes that allows that crap to slide off you a lot easier than when you don't know who you are. So my goal through my art is to bring identity to young people, help them get started, help them think about themselves in a good way, and just present our culture and our cosmology to those young people. Because that was a good thing you guys were talking about, how there are so many different nations across this whole country. And yeah, we have all these different belief systems, we have all these different cosmologies that are connecting, going right across the land. And so in Toronto here, I have a real deep passion about that land acknowledgement, because there's so many institutions here that have it wrong. And nobody knows the history, because most of the people are following a settler-based narrative. So when you look at the history books, we're not going to find our true history in those books. We need to talk to elders to talk about this oral histories. Because for me, the Ojibwe people, they are the first people of this land, even before Anishinaabe. Anishinaabe are new people. They didn't arrive here until 1,200 years ago. So the Ojibwe, these are the descendants of those ones to be called the ice runners. And according to some elders, that we've been here for 2 ice ages. And you know what that means? That we've been here a million years on this land. Like we're entrenched in this land, and our bones of our ancestors on this land. So, my artwork talks about that kind of stuff too, as I want the youth to know just the history of this place, and we need to start breaking down that that false narrative that exists across the land. And our young people, they need that. You know why? Because they need encouragement to go forward and be brave and do whatever they have to do to find, you know, what the place is called home. Because home is the place. If you feel like you're at home, wherever you are. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Philip. I really did like what you said when you were talking about we know what we need, and I believe that our youth know exactly what they need and what they want from programming. What we are launching a program here at the college for alumni, and I was kind of getting asked like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I was like, I will do what the alumni want me to do, and I'll tell you in 4 months. But Sam, I think you had something to add before we wrap up for the day or the morning.
Yeah, I just wanted to leave the guests on the call with a tool that they can use. I think a lot of what we're talking about is our current situation as Indigenous people, but to bring it back around to sports, when we're talking about sports and Indigenous youth, I want you to leave and I want you to reframe this kind of conversation in your mind and split it into 3. I want you to think about the systemic barriers that Indigenous youth have when just entering into sports or athletics or health in general. And that could just be things like funding, that could be money, that could be infrastructure. And then I want you to bring it to the community level. And I want you to understand that as a community, there's different needs. The community, I mean, for settlers, I guess like a big team. And then for the individual level, what is stopping one person from being able to participate in a way that is meaningful or in a way that's going to impact them? Because all 3 of those things are so interconnected. And if you can't frame the help that you're trying to give in a systemic, a community, and an individual level, then it's confusing. And it's kind of just like a patchwork of white saviorism. Like what I think we really need to do is say, you have the infrastructure already, you just need the money, or you need the people to run the place. You need the coach. You got the money, you got the coach, bring them in. Or, you know, maybe you need the individual. You have to go right down to the individual person and build up that individual so that they feel ready to even enter into sports, enter into a team. Like, take a step back from your perspective that you have already and try and reframe it so that you can have a similar understanding just how we perceive the world, not just in sports, but, ooh, Philip's got stuff in the chat. Yeah, it's cultural practice. But yeah, that's all I wanted to leave with, is just separating that systemic, community, and individual, and then trying to reframe everything through that lens.
And I guess I'll kind of just jump off of what Sam just mentioned. You don't have to start from scratch. There's actual Indigenous peoples already doing these things. Please stop recreating the wheel. And for systemic things, please read the TRC calls to action. I'm so sick of hearing about reconciliation that has no connection to survivors or the TRC. Like, just because you're talking to an Indigenous person doesn't mean it's reconciliation or that anything's really changing. So please, like, there's literally sports calls to action. So that applies directly to this conversation. And there's so many other calls to action too that everyone should really be contributing to and working on. So I just wanted to add those. Miigwech.
And talking with Indigenous people is not consultation. It's not consultation. This is not consultation. What's happening right here? Unless you're gonna pay me. Thank you, Gabby.
Sam.
If could I add something too, I guess, in final closing? So yeah, great words, everybody. Y'all are great. Y'all are awesome. You want to be on my team. But yeah, you know, I think you are like part of my team, you know, like this idea of a team, but like idea of kinship, right? You know, y'all are part of my kin. And so that's really important. And so in sports, growing up in sports, I was one of the only Native kids in hockey, and I experienced a lot of racism. And then I felt so ashamed of who I was until I actually went to the Little NHL hockey tournament. And I'm like, whoa, this is the most Native people I've ever seen in my entire life. I was like, this is wild. It's so cool. And I felt so proud. So, you know, spaces like that are super important. like the Indigenous Sports and Wellness Ontario, that organized sports wellness organization is super cool. They do really cool stuff, you know, awesome to bring, you know, people together, and the importance of sports as well. I seen this one team, it was a Haudenosaunee team. They did for one of their teams that they did is their whole team, non-native kids as well, they went out and harvested a deer. And I was like, whoa, cool, because it was about building relationships beyond outside of, you know, just the sport itself. But it was like, and it showed them about harvesting the deer and giving it back to the community, right? Where it was like, yeah, maybe they got to eat some of it, but it was more about harvesting it together, learning that skill and giving it back to community, you know, being in a position to give back. And I think that was a huge, important lesson that I learned just from that experience. You know, it's all about relationships, relationship building, maintaining relationships, sustaining those relationships, you know, community, and, you know, putting that love, reciprocity, as it was mentioned earlier. So yeah, really good stuff, everybody. So yeah, pretty much.
Miigwech, everyone. Miigwech, Quinn, Sam, Gabby, Philip, for joining me today. Thank you to everybody who's here for flowing with us from sport to movement to art, that all was based in culture. I was so happy to be here, and now I'm going to hand it back over to Kendra to take us through the Q&A.
Yeah, so I mean, if anybody has questions, they can throw up in the chat. Feel free, and I know Quay has to jump to important business, but the rest of us perhaps can stay for 5 or 6 minutes if anybody has any questions. Thank you all for being here today. It was such an important conversation. And I love a lot of the messages that were coming out around, you know, the importance of community and what that means in this particular context, and how important it is for communities and Indigenous youth to really be leading their own empowerment and sort of deciding what their own path and their own future looks like. So deeply, deeply grateful for you all to come here and share with us about this topic. I think we need to have more conversations like this. And to everybody else on the call, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We're going to send out some of the resources that these folks mentioned as part of our follow-up email. And as Gabby said, you know, like, let's reflect on how we're actioning the TRC action items, and how we can both how all of us can move forward in a really good way together. So appreciate all of our panelists. Thank you again for being here.
I'd just like to add something, if I may,
Yeah.
before
Yeah,
we
Phil.
sit down. First of all, I
Yeah.
want to thank all the other speakers here. It's so wonderful to hear all your brilliant thoughts on this very serious issue. And, you know, we're going to all go forward, and we're all going to share this knowledge. And this is a great thing that we did today, just hearing everybody else speak about their different points about how they've discovered solutions about what they think was important about how to change these things for the next generation. But you know, the main thing about this is representation, and that's what we need in all these organizations. We need to have Indigenous representation so that people at the top are speaking to an expert at the top, so that there's no guessing about what they should accept as a, you know, a standard, because there is no standard. But especially for we're in a particular community, get those people that are in that community represented. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Phil, for closing us off in a good way, and reminding us, you know, sort of what we can take going forward. That's all. That's it. That's all for us, folks. Quay dropped her contact if anybody is interested in following up with them, and her LinkedIn profile. Humber also curated a Spotify playlist with pump up songs, so feel free to get on that. And we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, folks.